continuation of the Joanna de Angelis series book and teachings that she brings to us. Once more, Jesus and Possessions. And Kirsten, it's all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. And good day, good evening, good morning, wherever you may be in the world where you're watching. Thank you for joining us. And let me just share my PowerPoint for everyone. So yes, we are continuing our study on the book Jesus in Our Days. We are on chapter 14. But don't worry if you haven't joined us before or you haven't listened to any of the previous or you've missed a couple, is totally fine. Each chapter is independent of one another, builds on each other, but also each one is equally as beautiful and can hold its own. So as usual, just as an FYI, today we are streaming slightly differently. So for those of you who are watching live and you have any comments or questions you want to share, please do so either via our Facebook or directly in our YouTube, and we'll be able to see your actual comments. And if I'm correct, I'm looking what I'm looking at. It's the YouTube channel for Spiritist Net. So that's where the talk is, where I can actually see your comments and the live chat that's there. And also as well through our SS Baltimore website. So without further ado, we begin our study trying to understand Joanna de Angelis' message about Jesus and possessions. But first, we wanted to bring this reminder for us that these teachings of Spiritism are universal. And when we're talking about possessions, we're inevitably also talking about attachments. And we just wanted to bring a couple of quotes here just to remind ourselves that these are universal teachings. These universal teachings that Kardec and the spirits reminded us of. These are teachings that exist everywhere, inside and outside of Spiritism. That this idea of our understanding of possessions and attachment, which we'll get into here in a second, isn't just a Spiritist theory. Across the board, many different belief systems and religions have equally similar, if not identical, ideas. So aside from that, we also wanted to bring an understanding of when we talk about possessions, and we're just going to actually switch our slide here real quick. Give me for just 1 second. When we talk about possession, we want to first understand what it means, at least in layman's terms. It's a pretty straightforward definition according to Merriam-Webster. It's the state of having, owning, or controlling something. But what do we really own anyway? When we talk about possessions, we can think about money, and oftentimes money is usually the currency or the medium in which we acquire things, generally speaking, unless you're inheriting those things. So it's also equally as important for us to understand the idea of money and to understand money in general and its purpose. And forgive me as I just adjust myself a little bit here. So going to the next slide and understanding possessions, attachment, and money, because ultimately as we share, how do we come across possessions, but through usually the currency of money, it's important for us to have in the back of our minds and as a part of this backbone and understanding that we're building upon, that we understand what money stands for and what its purpose is, at least from a Spiritist perspective. And there's this great little book entitled Money that was produced, that's by the Spirit Emmanuel, by the medium Francisco Xavier, that was published and produced in English by the United States Spiritist Federation. You can go to their website to purchase your own copy. It's a great little book. And we just brought a little excerpt from the book for us to understand the actual meaning of money. And Emmanuel, in this particular excerpt says that money cannot buy heaven, but it can generate sympathy on earth when used for tasks of goodness. Money is unable to buy goodwill. However, it sows the benefit and the contentment of living when our soul remains directed towards divine inspiration. Money has no exchange value after death. However, it does sustain general progress if our spirit is centered on elevated goals. Money is not the absolute factor for joy or happiness, but it can be the remedy for a patient, the drop of milk for the helpless little child, the shelter for the elderly relegated to the cold night, and the silent help for the homeless pilgrim. Money is unable to generate light. However, it can extend the source of ideas of consolidation and love in which many souls who are thirsty for peace will quench and will quench their thirst. I apologize. Screen is unable to see the last words. So very deep thoughts, but extremely important for us to have and understand as we're building upon our understanding of possessions and attachments and money and things of the like. So money in and of itself and possessions in and of itself, these things are not necessarily negative, but it seems like, according to Emmanuel and Spiritism, it's all about how we choose to utilize it. But let's go a little deeper directly into the thoughts and words from Joanna de Angelis in this particular chapter. And let's talk together and dive a little bit deeper into the understanding. She says, the attachment to material things becomes a cage that imprisons distracted owners who actually end up belonging to that which they think they possess. Possessions cause affliction due to the fear of losing what has been accumulated, the anxiousness to pile up even more, and having to leave them whenever present death draws nigh. Possessions foster delusion because they intoxicate individuals with pride and power, believing they deserve privileges and exceptional deference, which do not keep them from becoming ill, neurotic, lonely, and dying like everybody else. Possessions harden the sentiments, which lose the tonic of solidarity, compassion, charity, causing one to forget about others and think only of oneself. There's a really good book that really illustrates what Joanna is saying here. It's a book that Leo and I had studied and done a series of talks on. The book is entitled Action and Reaction by the Spirit Andrea Louise, by the same medium from the book Money, Francisco Candido Xavier. And in this book, they have many different cases of circumstances of people's lives. And one of the cases actually entails what happens with a particular gentleman and his life, his family, when he becomes really attached to money, when he plots and kills his own siblings, and when they pass away, how they end up obsessing his descendants, and how all of that, being driven by this desire and attachment to material things, how it ruins this family for quite a long time until the higher spirituality is able to intervene and assist. So it's a very amazing book. If you've never had a chance to read it, it's a great opportunity to actually see real examples of a lot of the teachings and repercussions about what we're talking about and how things play out in our lives. Because we read sometimes and we think, wow, this sounds really great, but it seems sort of detached from us. So sometimes when we read an actual story, it helps to put things into perspective for us. So we do highly recommend, if you get a chance to read that particular book. It's excellent to have a better understanding of a lot of these teachings. But Joanna goes on. She says, owners who are not interested in sharing values or offering worthy opportunities for work are slaves who become more and more tarnished as their attachment to their possessions intensifies. Wealthy are those who give, spreading their wealth, which multiplies in various hands for the general good. Truly wealthy people are conscious investors who do not hinder society's growth, but broaden its arena of accomplishments. So here we see two examples of completely different types of people. There are those who are self-serving and only interested in themselves, and there are likewise those who are wealthy, but who are interested in sharing that wealth and watching it grow and help those around them, society, to create growth. And we can see a lot of, perhaps I shouldn't say a lot, a number of wealthy individuals who facilitate growth for humanity. Now, some might still have some level of selfishness, but at the same time, they still are facilitating a lot of growth and opportunity for a lot of human beings. Bill Gates' company, and one similar to his, there are many on the market and out there, who allow so many hundreds of people to benefit from working not only at the organization, but also are benefiting humanity in general with the progress and the systems that are created for overall for humanity, for the benefit of humanity. Let's put it that way. So perhaps one could say, or one could even argue, that perhaps maybe some of their behaviors aren't the best, but overall, there's a lot of positive things with it. Again, just wanted to remind you all who are just tuning in now, we are streaming live through our Facebook as well as through our YouTube channel. And also via the Spiritist Society of Baltimore's website. You can leave your comments down below on our YouTube channel. Any comments or questions that you might have or wanted to share, please feel free, and we will be sharing them and reading them at a later point in our talk today. But Joanna goes on. She says, they know they are temporary stewards and not permanent owners, and that when the time comes, they will have to render an accounting for the wealth that was entrusted to them. Actually, people owe nothing at all, neither themselves nor their lives. They merely use whatever comes and goes. Discovering this reality harmonizes them inwardly and with all that is temporary, while in transit to what is eternal, their spiritualizations. So the truly wealthy, the ones who truly have a lot, are those who are giving, altruistic, those who have this understanding that they have to remain accountable, and they are being held accountable, and they hold themselves accountable, and they know that what they have is truly not theirs. And Joanna reminds us that those that have this reality are able to be more balanced and in tune within life and their purpose, which is ultimately all of our purpose and goals in life, which is to become spiritualized, to grow on a deeper level. And let me just, because the computer itself is cutting off and I can't see. She says, eventually they enjoy wealth, but do not hold on to it. As for life, they no longer abuse it. So once they reach that level of understanding, they don't feel the need to abuse life as we see it. For instance, what is she talking about here? So we can see in modern society, once we became industrialized, how man, and when I say man, I mean man and woman in general, well, we can see how society has truly abused its resources, has abused Mother Earth and really taken advantage of, and similar to the idea of capitalism where you get what you can get at any expense. And so we end up taking advantage and harming others. But she says that for people that are truly understanding of life, those who are truly wealthy, as she says, don't abuse things around them, don't abuse people, don't abuse their assets, don't abuse their opportunities, but they take every opportunity to do good. They take every opportunity to help others. They take every opportunity to utilize the resources within their power. So when we think about this, we might think, well, you might already be categorizing in your mind like, well, I'm not rich or I'm not wealthy. I'm not a Bill Gates. We don't believe she's referring strictly to the extremely wealthy. She's referring to all people on all levels. Anytime we have the opportunity to have a little bit more than someone else, whether it's in a monetary sense or whether we have more land or more food or something of that nature, and we become very attached to it, and we're not sharing and we're not assisting others, that is where the true issue lies. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we move on. But she utilizes this very popular story, and most of us have more than likely have heard this story already. And it's the story of the rich man. And it is in Mark chapter 10, verses 17 through 31. And this is the New Living Translation. And I'm just going to go ahead and read this short little excerpt from the Bible. And it says, as Jesus was starting out on his way to Jerusalem, a man came up to him, knelt down, and said, good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus responded to him, you must not murder. You must not commit adultery. You must not steal. You must not testify falsely. You must not cheat anyone. And honor your father and your mother. And the man looked at him and said, teacher, I've obeyed all these commandments since I was young. Looking at the man, Jesus felt genuine love for him and said to him, there's still one thing you haven't done, he told him. Go and sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. At this, the man's face fell, and he went away sad, for he had many possessions. Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. This amazed them. But Jesus said again, dear children, it is very hard to enter the kingdom of God. In fact, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. And Joanna gives us a very beautiful understanding of this interaction between this rich man and Jesus. And she says that this encounter with the rich young man who was ready to follow him is clothed with remarkable present day content. What does that mean? That this story is as accurate and as applicable today as it was way back when, uh, hundreds of years ago. So it's applicable in our lives for us to stop and think about and reflect. So let's do that together. She says, in spite of having fulfilled the formal requirements of society and religion, he, the rich man, was unaware of how important it was to align his life with the fertile ideal of life eternal. So in layman's terms, this man led by society's definitions a very good life. He fulfilled everything that society and his religion asked him to do, except he didn't align himself. He didn't tune in. He didn't access this understanding that life is eternal, that this physical life is transitory. She goes on to say, he wanted the kingdom while enjoying the favors of the world in the form of assets that made his opulent journey easy. In other words, he wanted his cake and to eat it too, as the saying goes. He wanted it all. But that's not reality. That's not how things work. And Joanna goes on to actually give us a deeper understanding of where this man stood. So we know that this was a pretty decent man. He did abide by social norms and rules. He did do everything that his religion asked him to do. But he didn't quite reach all the goals that he could have, i.e., he didn't have that understanding of eternal life. But Joanna paints a picture for us. She says, this man, he longed to follow Jesus. He longed to follow Jesus. So he had a spark. He had something good in him. He knew that Jesus was good, that Jesus was love and kindness. So he longed to follow Jesus and enjoy his company without contributing anything in return. Acquiring more without depriving himself of anything was his plan. And probably this might not be unlike some of us in some respects, in some instances in our lives, in some examples or things we have gone through. We want to feel good. We want to feel healthy. We want to feel better than what we're feeling without really having to do much in return, without having to really put forth a lot of effort. And one of the most easiest examples of that is how much a lot of people would love to lose weight easily. But in order to actually reach that goal, there needs to be a tremendous amount of effort. Well, it's the same when we are becoming spiritualized, when we are growing on a spiritual level. There needs to be a considerable amount of effort on our part. Oftentimes, it's things that we have to sacrifice: our ego, our selfishness, and sometimes we have to even deprive ourselves of what we think that we need or want to be able to embrace what we truly need. And this man, this rich man, he was not at that point where he was willing to give up anything, to give up any of the conveniences of his life. And Joanna goes on to depict this man and the master, and she says, the master who knew him deeply established as the fundamental requirement that he sell all he possessed, give the money to the poor, and then follow him. Because life entails exchanges and trade-offs. To those who have it, it will be given, and from those who do not have, it will be taken. From those who are miserly and never share the excess, it is nothing, but to everybody else, it is everything. The young man was rich and hedonistic, but he was not happy because he lacked solidarity, which pacifies the anxieties of the heart. So, from an outsider's perspective, yes, this man had everything. He was rich. He enjoyed all the pleasures of the flesh. But deep down, Joanna gives us a good perspective into his psyche. He was not happy because he lacked this solidarity. And what is solidarity? It's nothing more than being able to come together as a community and help one another. And she reminds us that that act of solidarity is very pacifying for the anxieties of the heart. Why? It reminds us that we're not alone, that we can work together in a team, that there is beauty and kindness and so much more outside of our physical possessions. So much more enriching when we are able to interact and share with one another versus hoarding all the toilet paper for ourselves. There's so much more out there to be shared and had through solidarity, through our interactions with other human beings. Joanna goes on to say that perhaps he could have freed himself from material things. However, he was not used to the limits of want, to making ends meet, or to a less preeminent position, lacking the deceitful attraction of vanity and flattery. So he was not used to having to want for anything. He had every luxury known to man. It just wasn't a point in his life where he was willing to give it up. Renouncing his wealth would have been a step in the direction of self-denial, and that was too much for him. Blessed with abundance, he dreaded lack. Thus, he was rejected, what was permanent, and lost himself in banality. Something really interesting here is that he could have taken this opportunity, much like a lot of us, like this story of the rich man. We encounter opportunities in our lives, and we're asked as well to step in the direction of self-denial, to not make it about us. And we'll give you a modern day example. As the pandemic was unraveling, and we were in communication with a lot of our friends, and one particular friend of mine who was at a local store, local grocery store, and forgive me for the personal anecdote, but I wish to prove a point here. And this particular friend, Bella, she actually, we had asked of her to pick us up some diapers and what size and what have you, and the brand and et cetera, et cetera. So by the time she did all that and contacted us, letting us know that she was nearby, she happened to tell us something which kind of really sort of shocked us back into the reality of, hey, yeah, we're in this pandemic and things are crazy, but let's not forget to be human and kind. So amidst a lot of selfish examples we see out there in society, this particular friend of mine had reminded me that day that to be kind. And I'll tell you what happened. When she brought the diapers, or the diaper box to us, and she actually told us a story that when she had gotten 2 big boxes, and as she was pushing it towards the register, there was a woman who was sort of frantic, saying, "Oh my gosh, I need a pack of diapers," and it happened to be, the particular size, and there was no more of that particular size left over. So without even thinking anything of it, you know, Bella goes and gives this extra box to this person, and the remaining box was absolutely sufficient for me, for my family, so I really didn't need 2 boxes, so it was fine. But we thought it was interesting to be reminded of this, that at any small moment in our lives, we are asked to confront ourselves, much like the rich man was confronted with his own self, of course, with Jesus there, to give up, to act towards self-denial, to let go of the attachment of things. Because even though this particular item was not for her, it was for somebody else who was in need, she didn't just think of herself or myself, but also the needs of others in our community. And that was done without much thought. And how many of us, if we're walking through the grocery stores and grabbing a whole bunch of, items, are we thinking about, well, am I leaving any for the next person? There's this beautiful story about Chico Xavier, and I might be altering the story a little bit, but overall, you'll get the gist, where he was shopping for produce, and he happened upon, let's say, some tomatoes, and there were some really beautiful, ripe, red tomatoes, and there were some other ones that looked a little more less attractive. So he decided to pick a lot of the less attractive tomatoes. And when a friend of his asked him, Chico, there are so many fresh and beautiful looking tomatoes. Why are you getting all the ugly ones? And he said, well, because I have to think about the next person. If I take all the good looking tomatoes, what about my neighbor or someone else is going to come along? Then they won't get any. So something for us to really think about, especially now. As Joanna stated, this story is as pertinent and as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Something for us to really contemplate, because we may think about this rich man and put ourselves in a completely opposite category and think, well, I'm not there, so I don't have to worry about any of those things. No, we are all having the opportunity every day in different ways to face the same challenges as this rich man did. Some in small ways, some in larger ways. But it's worthwhile for us to contemplate what our true purpose is and why we're doing what we're doing. Joanna goes on to say, along with your money, properties, securities, and livestock, you also possess, as tormenting assets, the passions and caprices resulting from them. So not only do we have the physical things themselves, but all of the issues that come along with it. So there's this famous saying in English, in I guess the world of, I'm not even sure, the music world or ebonics or what have you, but it's basically, there's an old saying that says, more money, more problems. It's often utilized by a lot of rap artists and things of the like. But it's this idea that, yeah, sure, okay, it seems like money is really great, but with more money, more properties, more livestock, if you will, more things you possess, come a lot more issues along with it. Perhaps it's not an idea that a lot of us think about, because oftentimes we might idealize and romanticize the rich. But if we simply do a little bit of research on using Google, you see that there are a plethora of rich people that are incredibly unhappy. A great amount of people in Hollywood that are extremely unhappy or are going through similar emotional and life crises that we are, who don't have a quarter of what they have. Joanna goes on to say, you long for peace and love, happiness and self-realization. Nevertheless, when the opportunity arises, you hesitate and calculate what you must give in exchange, choosing to continue as you always have. So yes, much like the rich man, we want to be happy. We long for that sensation of inner peace, of love, of tranquility, of being self-realized or self-actualized and just reaching that peak in our lives. But yet when we get the opportunity, to do good, much like the rich man, to detach from our material objects, possessions that we have. But we don't, and we choose to continue on the path that we are on, not wishing to sacrifice anything, not wishing to be inconvenienced, and just choosing to proceed on the way we are. And until we reach a point where we're ready to do otherwise, we really won't. We might continue in our suffering and complaining and venting about our challenging situation or how unhappy we are. But much like that story of the dog and the nail, where there was a man who was passing by a dog with its owner, and the dog was just sort of crying a little bit. And the man who was walking by said to the owner, "Well, why is your dog like crying?" And the owner said, "Oh, because he's laying on top of a nail." And the man looked at him kind of strangely and said, "Well, why doesn't the dog just get up and off the nail?" And the owner said, "Well, because he's not suffering enough. So he'll stay where he is because he doesn't want to move." So sometimes we are like this dog, that we are in an uncomfortable situation, but we're not too uncomfortable where it forces us to change until life reaches a point where we are truly forced out of our comfort zone. And that's when it's even a million times more difficult, because instead of getting up off the nail while we have the chance, while things aren't too bad, we wait for things to get really bad for us to become sick or ill or unbalanced. And that's when we decide to change, which is an uncommon behavior, to be honest, across, humanity as a whole. It often takes a great deal of pain for us to wake up and realize what we have. Just today, we had a meeting with youth, and we are really pleasantly surprised to hear some positive feedback from these young teenagers talking about how this pandemic and social isolation and social distancing really has made them reflect and appreciate what they had before, and to moving forward, to not take those things for granted. So just something for us to think about. Joanna goes on to say, "You desire but feel unsure about the choice you have to make, the contributions you must offer, and your struggle for liberation." So we want it, but we're unsure of how to proceed forward. We're in doubt. We're like that dog on the nail. "Oh, I'm suffering, but I'm not sure. Kind of stuck in my ways, but I don't want to do anything." Or like the rich man, knowing he has this internal conflict. He wants to follow Jesus because he knows how great Jesus is, but he doesn't want to give up what he has. So it's a problem. But he goes on living his life anyway. Joanna reminds us, as she ends this particular chapter, what we are entitling Concluding Thoughts. She says, "Happiness only exists for those who are free." And what does that mean? Free of attachment to things. There is happiness only for those who, having found the truth, assimilate it and take it as their norm of conduct. So, what does it mean to assimilate something? When we are actually able to incorporate it into our lives as something normal every day, that is where happiness lies. And let us not forget that the rich man had everything, had all the pleasures that life could bring him. But Joanna gave us a clear glimpse into his mind and his heart, and she said he was not happy. From the outside, he had a lot of stuff that we might even today look at people and say, wow, that person has this great, beautiful house and fancy cars and they want for nothing and they go on these trips and I see them on Facebook. And you might say, well, I see all these great trips they take to, here, there, and everywhere. Oh man, their life must be so wonderful and so great. Please don't take social media as an accurate depiction of anyone's lives. Because generally speaking, most people don't necessarily put out every negative aspect of their lives. Tend to more paint a pretty picture for those who are watching. But the reality is that this true freedom is in this detachment from those things. If that rich man had been able to let go of those possessions and give them to people who truly needed it, to a lot of people because he had things in excess, he would have been able to detach from that necessity to hold on to things. And that necessity to hold on to things may not necessarily mean or refer to people who have a lot of things. We could have just a little bit compared to perhaps on a grander scale of maybe people living in mansions. But even those little things that we're holding on to and we're so attached to and can't let go of, it's a hindrance to our happiness. With that being said, we don't believe that Spiritism nor Joanna is trying to say that we should be reckless or that she's trying to condone irresponsibility, that you should just give everything away and not think about it. As a matter of fact, in the Spirits book, I believe it's in the part 3 of the Spirits book when they talk about the law of charity. And they talk about how much responsibility we have in investigating what are the true needs of people and how we can best fulfill that. So it's not just about blindly giving things away or giving people money, because not all people need material things to be helped. Sometimes people want to feel less alone, want to feel more connected. We never know unless we actually put in the time to figure out what are the needs of our fellow man. And again, I say man, that's interchangeable between man and woman. Happiness only exists for those who are free. Are we free? Are you free? Free of attachment? Are we able to let go and share? Thoughts for us to think about. She goes on to say, in the whirlpool of your squabbles and conveniences, if you long for new and harmonious life, listen to Jesus. Rid yourself of everything. Give to others what may be useful and follow me. The question is, are we ready for that? Because humanity as a whole is at this crossroads where Jesus is asking all of us, give up where you're attached to and follow me. Give to others what might be useful. Help your community and follow me. And what is it to follow Jesus? But to be the best version of ourselves, to be kind and loving as he was, to be charitable, non-judgmental. Because Jesus loved all people from all walks of life, and he didn't judge. He sought to educate and help to correct people, then encourage them not to continue on the same path that they were. And we should do the same. We read a quote today that said it's much easier to judge others than to stop and think about our own selves and reflect about how we can better ourselves. That takes more effort. It's so much easier just to point fingers and look at my neighbor and those in my community and pass judgment. It's so easy to do that. Anyone at any grade level can pass judgment. Doesn't take a scientist or much education to pass judgment. But it does take a considerable amount of work on the individual's part to self-reflect, to deepen our own personal understanding of the meaning of life and our purpose. Something for us to think about. And she states, unburdened, you will be blessed by the light and consequently be free and happy. So the goal is for us to detach, because in that, Joanna shares with us that we will become unburdened. We will feel lighter. This weight of the things that we're carrying and we're attached to will unburden us. If you've ever had that sensation of like, wow, whew, I feel like a weight is lifted off my chest. I can breathe now. That is the sensation that she's talking about. It's a deeper happiness that perhaps we have yet to tap into. And right now in this pandemic that we're experiencing is a great opportunity for us to reevaluate our beliefs, our purpose, to realign our actions, to live more authentically, not to compare ourselves to others, because comparison is death. Don't do that. Compare yourself to yourself. Your old you and the new you want to become. That's the idea. And we will be blessed by this amazing light and be free and happy, which is ultimately everybody's goal. Nobody, from the most hardened criminals to the most elevated human being on this earth ever says, oh, I don't want to be happy or free. I want to be shackled and unhappy. Nobody says that. Nobody wants that, I should say. Everybody desires to be happy. We often just go about it in a complicated way. Sometimes it's even counterintuitive. But we all want to be happy. So we leave you with these thoughts from Joanna. Listening and participating. If you have any thoughts, questions, or just comments you wanted to share, I'll read some of the comments that were shared here in our live chat. And if there are no additional comments or questions, again, by the way, you can leave them on our YouTube channel under Spiritist Net in the talk called Jesus and Possessions. There's a live chat going on there. Or you can also make comments on our Facebook page, which we can utilize our assistant here to read those comments to us. You can place any comments or questions that you want, feel free. But if not, we'll proceed on to our visualization. Right here. So let me just read a couple of comments that I could see. And I just saw one actually that ended up coming from Yasko in our WhatsApp group. Yasko says, great, Kirsten. How about control of the destiny, life of certain groups of people, not sharing the same opportunity and resources for education, growth, to choose their future, career, to know the truth? It has been done by church authorities, by male-driven cultures even now, not allowing, for instance, of equal education for girls, equal pay, same high quality of education across the economy, lower families, etc. Isn't this a type of possession? So let me see if I understand correctly. How about the control of the destiny, life of certain groups of people? So I think what you're asking is that there are certain groups and cultures that don't have equality, that don't offer the same opportunities, let's say, as one might refer to in first world versus a third world. So if we look at it from a singular perspective, if we look at it from, well, we only have one life and that's it, from that perspective, things are very unfair and things are not balanced in the universe. However, if we look at it from a reincarnatory perspective, that we lead many lifetimes, that we live in many different cultures with many, and we live and reincarnate in many different races, we have the more deeper understanding that from one life to the next, we endure or experience whatever culture we are born into, whatever country born into, that we need to for that lifetime for our own personal growth. That being said, let me add a little parentheses to that. That doesn't mean that those societies are correct. The idea is for us to be equal as can be, that both genders, that all genders are recognized as equal, and that we're more so looked at as human beings, that each person has the opportunity to grow as their neighbor does, whether it's on a level of education or what have you, but they would have the same equal opportunities as we do across the board. So Yasu says, isn't this a type of possession? Well, if you're referring to people who like to control under those circumstances in those cultures, it could be considered a type of possession because it's an attachment to something. Perhaps for some people, we could hypothesize that living a certain way in certain cultures is they're attached to that idea, and to live any other way is absolutely out of the question. That is an attachment to an ideal or an idea or a belief that's very unhealthy and self-serving oftentimes. So yeah, it's detrimental. So thank you, Yasko. I hope I interpreted your comment/question as appropriately, or as you wish to be interpreted. If not, you can let me know. Going to our YouTube live chat, we have Fatim, and she made some comments. She says, so by not being rich, we are lucky because we don't have to make the sacrifice to give everything we got to prove our devotion. And maybe it's something we wouldn't be able to do. So by not being rich, we are lucky because we don't have to make this sacrifice to give everything we got to prove our devotion. So I think, Phantom, what you're referring to is, even in the Gospel, Spirit's book, they talk about how, in the Gospel, how it is a great trial to be born rich. That it is, in some respects, less dangerous, if you will, to be born in an impoverished culture or family, because you don't have everything at your fingertips. Whereas when you have a lot of material possessions and wealth, to commit crimes or to commit crimes against God, which might necessarily be viewed in man's laws as committing a crime, is a lot easier. To be selfish is a lot easier. To not share because you have so much. You don't need anyone else to some degree because you have so much. Yeah, it facilitates us to go in a not so great direction. So yeah, in some respects, it's a little bit easier not having all those possessions. Yes, most definitely. So it's a good reminder, because a lot of the time we often romanticize the idea of people that are rich living in Hollywood, or people who have mansions, lots of cars and money. And sure, hypothetically in our minds, we think, wow, if I didn't have to worry about having to pay this bill and have to stress, perhaps. But we don't know all of that which comes along that is burdensome and that is heavy to carry when we are in that position of having wealth. So Aloisio commented from Fatim saying, some get depressed. Some get depressed due to lack of money, and some get depressed due to excess of money. So I would say that everything are in the balance. So yeah, definitely. Having negative emotions, experiencing life challenges does not does not affect only those who lack money. It's not discriminatory. You could be rich, poor, somewhere in between. And a lot of our challenges and issues can reach all of us. That's why we see, like we talked about earlier, so many people that are wealthy that have a lot of emotional instabilities, a lot of emotional challenges, mental challenges, physical ailments, or what have you. Just because someone's rich does not equal happiness. I think that's the takeaway. Thank you, Aloisio, for sharing that.
Kirsten, if I may make a quick comment as well. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
You said it very well. I think this moment of our lives for us to share this message and bring this to the world. There's an amazing chapter also in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 16, that talks about wealth. It talks about the difficulties that we face in terms of having the wealth, having possessions, and still face issues, face problems. And I think one of that you brought to light here, as Joanna de Angelis invites us to do so, is the lack of meaning in life, even though you have material possessions, right? That we see nowadays, and as well as as Aloisio meant to bring to us here, the even when we lack, we go into desperation. But one of the things that I want to bring to, that I would like to highlight, is the level of wealth sometimes that we have. Yes, you mentioned, there are people who have a lot of money, who has a lot of wealth, and whatever that may be, and they have problems in their lives. But also there are people who have very little, and they're still attached to the very little that they have, and they live a miserable life with the little that they have as well. Mm-hmm. I have actually come into contact with people who have who they're very attached to their tools, for example, guys, right? Or people who have 2 pair of shoes and they are very attached to those 2 pair of shoes. I'm just giving you small examples, but the attachment that the value that we put into things, it can be very detrimental, as well as on the other side, that we think that wealth is only the greatest things of life, the greatest amounts of money, resources. But we all have possessions with us that we can multiply it, that we can share with others, and bring to as Joanna de Angelis mentions, make it available to people, make it useful to people. The useful things that we have, we can share it, right? So I think that this is a great reminder for all of us, and I really, really love this discussion, because the what we can bring and how useful we can make our lives and helpful we can make our lives when we share, right? When we take a step back and say, okay, I have all this wealth, and it may not be what Steve Jobs or the wealthiest people had in the world, but I can share something of myself and give of myself a little bit. So thank you.
No, thank you so much for sharing that perspective, Leo. It was a great addition to our presentation. And most definitely, we often, more times than not, will default to either, well, I don't have, I'm sorry, my computer might die here in a second. So I'm going to put it in to charge. We might default to, well, I don't have a lot, or I have so little, or I don't have. We often think it's always about material possessions, about physical things, when oftentimes we don't realize how thirsty people are for human interaction, we don't realize how thirsty others are, for just loving kindness. And for anyone who's ever gone through any deep issues, emotional trials that were wearing on your soul, you can attest to this, that, yeah, it's great for someone to come over and bring you some baked lasagna, but really, what really can satisfy your soul is to have a friend who can sit with you and listen to you and not pass judgment, but just be there to support you. That's where solidarity comes in. It is so nourishing for our souls. So we don't require a lot. Not much is required. We don't have to have a ton of possessions to practice solidarity, to share with others. I may only have one roll of toilet paper left. Well, I can give half of that roll to my neighbor if they need it. But it's not even about the physicality or the material thing itself. It's about the fact that I considered the need of my neighbor, that he knows that he's not alone, that I can recognize in him or her that they are valued. Because much like the story that I shared earlier about my friend Isabella and the diapers, we might think, well, they're just diapers, not a big deal. No, but what Isabella did for that random stranger was, in essence, say to her, you matter. Your life, your children, your family matter as much as mine do. And that is so powerful, especially when we were going through things such as a pandemic. Really stressful thing is alone. We feel lonely. We feel the sense of spiritual drought. That's why people thirsted for Christ. It wasn't because he could heal all of their wounds. It's because he was able to satisfy a thirst and a hunger that they themselves weren't even fully understanding of. All they knew is that he fulfilled that for them. And they wanted to hang on to that and live that life. So something for us to just contemplate and think about. I'm going to go back to some of the comments here in the live chat on YouTube. Aloysia says, but again, it's all about balance. And Fatim says, also during this crisis, everyone is pointing to the bad, the toilet paper hoarding, but I also witnessed the best in people and people sharing, loving, helping. Absolutely. We have seen some of the most amazing examples of people's humanity on local, Facebook pages, from people making masks to help healthcare providers and people working in the healthcare industry or working just in general with the public. We see people coming up with the most creative ways to practice solidarity. We were sharing earlier today a story that we heard on Facebook about a girl, I think she was a teenager, she's young, who had just finished her last bout of chemo. And her parents originally had the idea that once she finished her last round of chemo, they wanted to throw a party. But of course, given the pandemic and everything that's been transpiring, they couldn't do that for obvious reasons. So instead, all of her friends and family surprised this girl as she was driving home with her family to her home along her street. And all along the street were lined tons of cars of her friends and family, all holding up signs of solidarity saying, we love you, we're with you, we're so proud of you, you've reached it to this point, awesome, like just words of encouragement, beautiful things, that it's amazing. And just recently, this actor out of Hollywood, who I absolutely love for so many reasons, John Krasinski, who is most known for his part in the show called The Office, because much like the rest of humanity, he also is self-isolating, him and his family. And he recently just created this YouTube channel called the Good News Network, I believe it is. But if you Google it, you can find it. But basically, in essence, what he decided to do was that he noticed there was so much negativity going on, so much negativity that was being broadcasted through big media, that he really wanted to take the opportunity to show these small outlets of all these good things that were happening. People that were in these communities across the United States and even outside of the US that are coming together, that were being kind, that were sharing, and that are showing that we can and do have great people in humanity who do have the capacity and the capability to love, to be kind, and to really surprise us. So if let me just double check, make sure there's no other comments anywhere. I don't see anything else. So thank you all for listening, for watching, for participating, for offering your feedback, or just being present, or for somehow contributing to tonight's talk. So I will pass the ball to Leo. So stop sharing. Okay. I think Leo was just humming. Oh, you're mute, Leo. You're mute. Oh, you're still mute. Can't hear you, brother. There you go. Say hello.
All right, is it working now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I didn't know. The thing is responding a little bit late to it, but thank you.
Sure.
And thank you again, Kirsten, for this amazing reminder talk. Joanna de Angelis is amazing when she brings these topics to us, and her capability to bring the passages from the Bible as well, enlightening us in this difficult moment of our lives. And I think that throughout many things, the difficult things that we were seeing it, as well as Fatten mentioned, and you also enlightened us with these two cases. I think we would like to add this talk, this presentation, as one of the good things that is happening in life, right? So we would like to remind everyone to share it. Isabella was actually telling us here, we should share this more in a more upstream way, and she gave a couple of examples here, and we'll see what we can do with it. But for sure, Danny will make this available to us that we can watch it later on, and it's being recorded, and it's always a good opportunity for us to send as a gift for those that we cannot be physically with them. But just remind ourselves that there are other people who may need this message, and we can share with them and make our lives better. I think there are many great reminders here, and we live at that. On this note, as a thank you note for dear Creator for this beautiful opportunity, let us pray together. Let us find